will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh! He doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
With 5 seconds, he's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. There is a flag down, but holy smokes.
2 and 4 in overtime games. Carolina 1 and 3. Here from under center. Give off to Greg Little. Little pulls away. Little is going to score. Carolina wins.
Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good!
And it's
with
yes,
a 54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it!
Possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Hunter Burns.
In his end zone. The punt, very high. Switzer will have room to return it. He fields it at the 40. Coming near side, Switzer at the 50. Switzer, 45, cuts back at the 40. 35, breaks a tackle at the 30. Still on his feet. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Ryan Switzer for 6. He is doing his best Giovanni Bernard impression. Ryan Switzer again. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys, as always. And as you can see, Zack Hubbard back with me again tonight. I know we were scheduled to do something previewing the month of official visits, and I apologize for that, guys. I was going through some mental health stuff. I know if you guys are listeners to the Four Corners podcast, you guys know about that a little bit, but the good news is we're here tonight. We're going to update you on what we know to this point, and I will tell you this: there haven't been any commitments since the last time that we were on here. The Tar Heels are taking it a little bit slow when it comes to this month, but first of all, Zack, I think you just look at this month so far for Carolina. The good thing that I think you can take away before we start, going into some of the big headlines and asking some questions off of it, is that for the most part, Carolina has brought everybody that they were expecting to bring in for a visit. Now, that will change this weekend with one of the storylines that we'll talk about a little bit later, but everybody that Carolina was hoping to bring in, they have been able to get on campus, when it seems like there's a lot of other schools that maybe aren't able to do the same with some guys that Carolina is recruiting. So I think that's the most important thing to start out with, is that at least this staff is getting the guys that they want on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at it, this was a staff that was very active in the winter and spring. I mean, they got a good foundation of their class locked in, currently sitting at 10 total commitments. I mean, that's roughly half of your class, or 40% of your class right there. And now they're just sort of picking their spots with different guys as it remains for a class. And on the whole, we'll see how they conclude this upcoming weekend. It looks like they'll have the last few official visits then, but they've been able to bring in the guys that they've wanted to bring in. They've been able to really make some positive moves in terms of these sort of final few guys that they're looking at for another few spots here. And there's a lot of positive momentum. It's a little bit quiet as compared to some of the other official visit weekends around the country, but I think North Carolina really had a set plan of what they wanted to do in terms of these summer official visits, and they've really sort of, accomplished those goals. watch to see how those transform into commitments. But I think they've made sort of the positive momentum that they wanted to make in June that could lead to dividends down the line here, at the end of this month, going into July and August, and then into the fall season.
Yeah, I think one of the other big things, this month is, Carolina, they don't have any commitments just yet. And you're right. They sit at 10. I think that's, something that, at this point, is a pretty good spot because, again, you have to realize, I think a lot of Tar Heel fans have to realize that this is not going to be the biggest class. It's just not. You're coming off of a massive, massive class that you had the last time around. And so I think the important thing for Carolina is that they are building these relationships, but there probably are some people that are a little concerned about the fact that Carolina hasn't landed anybody after 3 official visit weekends. Where do you kind of stand? Do you think that there should be reason for concern that they have not landed anybody just yet?
I think that the concern is not 0, but it's not 10. On that sort of scale of 1 to 10, I'd put it at maybe a 3. I mean, you think in some instances it would be nice to have guys just decide that they want to, hop on board and go ahead and shut things down from there. But, like mentioned previously, sort of what we've seen is guys are being diligent. They're taking their visits, including their visits to North Carolina. And that's likely going to lead to a lot of decisions here over the next few weeks. So we'll see sort of if, these visits for North Carolina pay dividends or if, they have to go some other directions. Like you mentioned, I don't think it's going to be a huge class in terms of spaces. I mean, they're looking at probably maybe 19 to 20 total. So maybe not even that many. Like you mentioned, they brought in a big class last year. It looks like about, 27 to 28 guys out of high school. And then another thing I think to consider here, not only in terms of the size of this class, but just, everything overall there, it seems like they're being a little bit tighter, with having guys go ahead and lock things up, is just the portal class that they took in between last season and this upcoming season as well. I mean, they took 10 guys in the portal to go along with 27, 28 out of high school. That's a lot of new scholarships that they're giving out. And, obviously the freshmen are going to be freshmen. They'll have multiple years of eligibility, but these guys that they got out of the portal aren't necessarily, 5th-year seniors or guys that are immediately going to leave after a season. There's guys here that they have potential to stay for multiple seasons in the future. So I think it sort of makes sense that they are recruiting with that in mind, not only that they took a large high school class last year, but that they'll probably want to, go into the portal again, see what's out there, see how they can fill holes or find talent that, has developed at a different pace, or, guys that just didn't have the experience that they wanted at their first selection. But like I said, I think it's a slight concern because you'd like some of these guys to wrap it up. But I do think that they've made positive momentum with a lot of these visitors. And I think that, it seems like that we're moving towards a situation where they're in decision mode. It's going to be, over the next 2 to 3 weeks that we're going to see a lot of these guys sort of announce that they're committing, go ahead and proceed from there. And a lot of the buzz coming out of these weekends is very positive for North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I take it as well. And there are some guys that Carolina, as you mentioned, has made headway with. And we'll start, with 2 that were on campus last weekend. The first one is Shamarius Peterkin, who was a guy that, honestly, I think like a lot of other guys in the state of North Carolina, for a while, we thought Carolina was probably out of this recruitment. Did not make it public for right up until his visit that he was going to be on campus in Chapel Hill. I believe he revealed that on Thursday night, that he would be on campus the next day. So that was something he kept quiet, and we thought, okay, Carolina's out of the running for him. They're going to have to look elsewhere at receiver. Now, I've had, a couple of people that asked me, well, how high is he actually on Carolina's board? It seems like they're looking at other guys at the receiver position ahead of him. And I mean, look, they may have some deeper ties to some of the other guys that, they have already brought on campus. But I do believe that Carolina, with a guy that is as talented as Peterkin is, 4-star prospect, in-state prospect, more importantly, Carolina is going to, if there is an opportunity here, they're going to pursue it. The thing is, though, is, Zach, do we think that Carolina actually has a shot in this recruitment? Because this is one where State has been in control of this one for a while. A lot of people, there's a couple of crystal ball predictions in favor of State. Virginia Tech's been the team that's been seen as the biggest threat. What do you think? Do you think that getting him on campus shows that Carolina is actually in position to be a threat here, or is this one that maybe Tar Heel fans shouldn't be getting their hopes up about?
I think it's probably in between there right now. It's a little early to say. I mean, it was just a very sort of sudden visit, and obviously they're in the race. I mean, if you're going to get a visit, you at least have some sort of shot. But I think that it's at this point, they've sort of narrowed down their wide receiver board to about 3 to 4 guys that they're really looking at in terms of those spots. And I think that they're going to be selective there. Now, I don't know necessarily what that board looks like, but it seems sort of the inroads that they've made with other, prospects up to this point would suggest either that there was a lack of interest on one side over the other. I don't know necessarily who that's with, whether it's on, Peterkin's side or on the SAF side, just in terms of their evaluation. Maybe they like, certain, or there's multiple guys that sort of fit one role and they, are essentially leaving it up to the prospects of, first come, first serve. I think that they're involved, but I don't know at this point in terms of if they're going to be a legitimate threat. I think that I believe the OV or the official visit to NC State here this weekend, that's sort of been the team with buzz thus far. So it seems like it's sort of set up with them getting the last visit for them to potentially sort of, lock this up in terms of that recruitment. It's hard to say at this point, just because there's not been that sort of, steady communication or buzz around this recruitment as it relates to North Carolina. So it's difficult to really handicap that in terms of what they can do. If they are able to sort of, surge and get that commitment, it would be very quick, which has not typically been, their style here in the last few years. Typically, we see these relationships sort of build over time, but you never know. This is a program here over the last few years that has been very attractive to wide receivers and wide receiver play. They put a number of guys into the NFL at that position. They've recruited the position well, basically every year that we've had Mac Brown back in the role, as well as wide receiver coach Lonnie Galloway. It's been there, the whole time. So it would make sense if North Carolina gets them, but it's too difficult to say. I think they'll be fine regardless. They continue to recruit and develop the position well, but it's just sort of a wait and see mode on my end in terms of, is it Peterkin or is it one of these other guys that sort of take one of those spots of the, I'll say 2 to 3 that we'll see eventually in this class.
Yeah, I mean, look, they brought in a lot of guys in the last few years at the position. So this is not a position that this team is really dying to get guys at. But they always want to bring in at least probably 2 guys, maybe 3 in a class at wide receiver. To me, there's only 4 guys that are on Carolina's board. It's the 4 that visited campus here over the last 3+ weeks. I believe that, with Peterkin, because, Carolina sort of faded out a little bit, he may not be in that top group. I think, Micah Matthews, Malik Clark, those are probably the 2 guys that Carolina would take first in this class. I believe if they had to pick, they would take those guys. Now, Micah Matthews, about as wide open of a recruitment as it gets. The 2 in-state schools for him, Virginia Tech, are both doing very well. Carolina, I feel like, is in a pretty decent position as well with those schools. But there are a lot of other schools that he's taken official visits to, including both Utah and BYU. So he's a guy that's looking nationally to try to find where he's going to end up. Malik Clark's another guy who is taking a lot of visits, but Carolina, they have 2 crystal ball predictions on 24/7 Sports. Those are ones that are being stuck with right now. So I think, his connection with guys like Marshall Pritchett, if Onis Konanbani was to commit to Carolina as well, that could also factor in. So I think those relationships could be very helpful for Carolina when it comes to him. Now, the interesting guy would be a guy like Evan Haynes. Big guy, 6'3", 185, so a little bit bigger than Peterkin, but another guy that Carolina had on campus. I think that Peterkin would probably be a take over him just based off of the pure talent there. But again, you talk about relationships. Carolina's got a really strong relationship with Haynes, where Peterkin, I don't know. I'm not going to say that the relationship isn't good, but I still feel like NC State right now is probably the way that he is leaning. Unless State was to fill up, I'd be pretty shocked if Carolina is able to make up as much ground as you said. But is there a chance that it could happen? Yes, especially, you brought up what Mac Brown has been able to do recruiting-wise at the position since coming back. And that's because, he's done a great job of valuing the in-state guys. And there's been a lot of really successful in-state receivers. But Lonnie Galloway, as you mentioned, is the biggest reason why. This dude can develop these guys. He is, put a wide receiver in the NFL. I forget how many consecutive years it is now. I think it might be every year since he has been at Carolina, if I'm remembering the stat correctly. Like, this is just what Carolina does. So I think that could carry a lot of weight here. And if they do end up finding a way to eventually land Peterkin's commitment, that could be the reason why it goes that way for Carolina. Well, let's go to another guy, another in-state guy that was on campus over the weekend, and that's Tayshawn Alston, the 3-star edge rusher. And he revealed some news yesterday that he is canceling his official visit to Virginia Tech. This is pretty significant because Virginia Tech was one of the teams that was expected to be a part of a 3-team race for him. It really feels like now it's down to 2 to land his commitment, Carolina and South Carolina. So the big thing, Zach, with this is, another in-state guy. But we know that Shane Beamer has recruited well. He's recruited the state of North Carolina well in the last couple of years. When you look at Tayshawn Alston, how confident do you think that the Tar Heels and Tar Heel fans should be that they can actually land him when it's all said and done?
Well, I would have to say I don't think it's a slam dunk in terms of this recruitment, but I do think that North Carolina made up some significant ground with that official visit to have a puncher's chance in this recruitment. For a long time here in the spring leading into the summer, it seemed like South Carolina had a lot of that momentum. They had built inroads. They had, recruited him well and made him a priority, but North Carolina gets him on campus this weekend, and it seems like that they really sort of even things up a little bit with South Carolina in relation to that. And you can see that lead to a cancellation of an official visit this upcoming weekend. Now, he has officially visited Rutgers as well. I'm not going to discount them wholly, but I do agree with you. I think it's North Carolina versus South Carolina in this recruitment. And I feel that it's very close. It's almost, too close to call to some degree as it relates to that. If we were to put money on this, I would probably still lean slightly towards South Carolina in terms of that, just based on the established relationship, sort of the, established lead that they had through a lot of the spring. But I think it is close. If it was, 75% South Carolina in the spring, it's probably, closer to 50 or 55 now, with the chance for North Carolina to put in, that little extra effort to get the commitment to add another edge rusher to this class. So they're right there. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it, but they've made up significant ground to where that this is definitely going to be one to watch heading into, the next few weeks.
Oh yeah, I'm with you there. I don't know if the Tar Heels are in the driver's seat now. I think that South Carolina probably still has the slight edge, but I think you're right. It gave him a lot to think about. And to me, the most interesting part is that he canceled that official visit to Virginia Tech after taking his official visit to Chapel Hill. And you could say, well, maybe he really is just closing in on a decision. He saw what he needed to see at Carolina. I mean, South Carolina, he started the month off with that visit. And so, yeah, maybe he saw something from either South Carolina or possibly Rutgers. You're right. Can't really discount them. Although I would be a little shocked. I think he's a guy that's probably going to stay closer to home. But, for Carolina, I think one thing that's really important here is I think a lot of people are going to bring up the fact that, well, Carolina already has two guys, at least, possibly a third committed at that edge rusher spot. It depends on how you view Anthony Crua. I've told you, when we broke him down, I think he's a guy that probably long-term projects better to linebacker, especially with his build at 6'2", 210. The other thing that's important is, Camden Laudenschlager, guy that I like and I think has a lot of potential. He's also 6'3", 215. So another guy that when Carolina gets him on campus, it's going to take them some time. They're going to have to put weight on him. Carolina, I think, wants guys that can impact immediately, or at least have a chance to impact immediately starting next year, because you're going to lose Kamen Rucker. You're going to lose Desmond Evans. And so, look, they'll probably end up going to the transfer portal. There's no doubt about that. But I feel like a guy like Tayshawn Alston, especially in a class where you haven't recruited great in the state of North Carolina, you can never have too many edge rushers. And I mean, Carolina, they haven't had a ton of success, even with the guys that they have brought in that have been highly rated at times at the edge rusher position. I think this is a guy that if Carolina can bring him in, they will take him. And I think if they don't end up with him, I think Herbert Scroggins is where they will turn their attention. I think they want at least one more edge rusher in this class, probably just one more edge rusher in this class. And so I think, Carolina gave themselves a real opportunity here. I think the biggest thing is that now you're just hoping that if this is going to be a quick decision, that Carolina getting the last gasp here is what really sticks with him. And if that's the case, then, they could end up with a guy that, he started out as a guy, one of the better prospects in the state when they first ranked these guys. Now, just outside of that top 500 that we like to classify as blue chip prospects, but I still think would be a really good addition to this class for Carolina. So it'll be interesting to monitor him, because it feels like now that his official visit schedule is complete, it may not be long here before we at least get something. Maybe it's a top schools list. Maybe it's a final two, whatever. But we should get something, I would imagine, here pretty soon on him. Another guy, I mentioned that Carolina has gotten everybody on campus that they've wanted to so far. Well, that will stop this weekend. One guy that Carolina was supposed to have on campus over the weekend was 4-star safety Kenoa Winston, who was honestly one of the better prospects that Carolina could have landed in this class. Pretty much, in my mind, he may have been their top remaining target in this class. I know, safety is a spot that Carolina needs guys at, especially with the two slated starters as of right now, Stick Lane and NC State transfer Jakeen Harris, both being gone after the year is over. He was a guy out of the D.C. area that Carolina would have loved to help extend the footprint up even a little bit further. And the fact that he was as interested in Carolina as he was, I think, was something that was really exciting. He ends up committing over the weekend to Michigan. And so that means he will not take his official visit to Chapel Hill this weekend. And the first thing, Zach, that we have to talk about here is how much does this sting to lose this official visit from a guy that I think, I don't know how good the chances actually were that Carolina was going to land him, but the fact that Carolina, the things that he was saying about them, at least they were in the race, I think probably has some people feeling a little dejected.
Yeah, there's some sting here. I don't think that it was it wasn't a recruitment that North Carolina probably felt that they were, a runaway leader with, and then this just came out of nowhere.
Right.
We always knew that, a guy with his sort of national profile there in sort of the DMV area, there in DC, Big Ten schools like Michigan, who he committed to, and Penn State recruit that area very well. So it's not, it makes sense for this commitment to go the way that it did, though this is one that you felt that North Carolina at least would have been able to put their best foot forward and, maybe see what they can do there. Like you mentioned, this would have been probably the top or highest rated recruit or target in the class overall, and that just didn't come together in this regard. So it does sting a little bit. Like you mentioned, this is a position where they're going to have a number of guys leave, likely the 2 starters. We'll see if there's anyone else, but this is a position where they're going to need to add numbers in relation to that, whether that be through the high school level or in the portal. Right now they have Javion Butts committed, whether he plays safety, nickel, we'll see sort of where that goes. But this is a position where they're going to need guys, and they're sort of running low on options in terms of this recruiting class overall that they can sort of find those bodies at.
Yeah, I mean, you look, and I mean, Will Hardy, upperclassman already as a junior. And a lot of the guys that they brought in the past few years that can play the position, I don't know if they're going to end up playing there. I mean, you've got some guys that, Jaden Patterson, that was a guy that Carolina brought in the last class. I thought he would probably end up playing that position. He was running at corner and nickel a lot during the spring. And, you guy like Caleb Koss, another versatile guy when he came in. He's a nickel guy. Jalen Thompson, they were playing him on the outside in the spring game. So there's a lot of different guys that Carolina's brought in. But I wonder, are those guys coming in to play safety, or did they look at a lot of those guys as corners? And so that's the reason why I think it is important that they get, some more bodies in that room. Now, you mentioned Javion Butts is committed to the class. I think the biggest thing is, and to me, I think I just kind of answered the question right there for myself. I think that they need to bring in at least one more safety in this class. Now, that'll be easier said than done. It doesn't look like Carolina really has any other options on the table right now, unless they are going to all of a sudden try to turn things up with the guy that's already committed, Justin Rowe, who is from Asheville. He's committed to Virginia. That could be, a possible option. But outside of him, there really isn't anybody else, because Jordan Young, who's another in-state guy, he is not officially visiting Carolina. It seems like he's pretty much all but guaranteed to be heading to either Clemson or Florida State. And the other guys that Carolina's offered at the position, they haven't really had any shot with them the entire way. So to me, I think it's important for them to add somebody else. What do you think on that front, Zach?
Yeah, I think that it would be ideal for them to add someone else. I mean, obviously, you don't want to reach for a guy necessarily, but it seems like they are sort of putting out feelers for, a number of guys that may be in this class. There's been sort of buzz around 3-star safety out of Maryland committed to the Terrapins at this time. Julian Horton that may officially visit this weekend. We'll see if that goes anywhere. They'll sort of look around at guys. Like you mentioned, the safety committed to Virginia. They'll see what they can get, but the board has shrunk significantly with a guy like Winston going somewhere else. It feels like that they're getting down to some of their second or third tier options. We'll see what those come about to be, but it would be best if they could add someone here, at least one other body in this class to go along with likely what will be, some sort of, look into the portal for a guy. But, you'd like to add at least one more body there if you can get it.
Yeah, I mean, and you brought up Horton. I think that's probably the guy. He is going to visit this weekend, which is huge considering that he is committed, just took an official visit to Maryland. So look, if he had seen what he needed to, then he is not going to be on campus this weekend. If he makes that visit, then it feels like Carolina, the door is open for them. So ultimately, Zach, do you think they will actually land another guy in this class, or do you think that Javion Butts is the only guy that they bring in?
I think until we know more about this Horton visit this weekend, it's going to be hard to say one way or the other in terms of what they're going to add. I mean, that's mainly what we're looking at is guys that they get on campus. And this looks to be the last one that they're going to get on campus prior to the July dead period. So unless there's some, late riser in fall that they can bring in or some guy, and that seems to be, more and more rare here in, current or modern times that you have a guy that's sort of a senior riser. It's going to be difficult to really find one more body if it's not Horton, or if they don't, bring in someone else this weekend or sometime early in the fall that's really going to take that position in this class.
Yeah, if I had to say right now, I'll go somewhat positive and say they do end up landing somebody. It could be Horton. Again, I think if he makes the visit, that really gives them a great opportunity there. And if not, I also think that that's a spot Carolina could keep looking at. One of the guys that Carolina added late to last year's class was the JUCO transfer Tyrone Stewart. Don't rule that out as a possible option of looking into the JUCO ranks, especially after, the season ends or something like that, to try to add another guy. So I think this is a position that it feels like you need bodies at, and I think the staff knows that. I would not be shocked if Charlton Warren ends up bringing in somebody in this class. All right, the last one that we have storyline-wise from this 2025 class that we got to talk about is another guy that committed to Michigan, and that's Jasper Parker, the 4-star running back, actually 3-star running back if you go by the composite in the 2025 class from 24/7 Sports. This is a guy that Carolina offered just before he took his official visit. Actually offered him, I believe, the day that he arrived on campus, which would have been May 31st. He then takes his official visit during that first weekend. And Carolina, then officially enters the race. Well, Michigan, was a spot that he was going to visit, had been on him for a long time. In the middle of his official visit weekend there on Saturday, he ends up announcing his commitment to them. And so this means that Carolina, is down to 2 guys really on their running back board. It's a guy that visited in the middle of last week, Carolina, Penn State, seen as the 2 teams that are really battling for him, and that's 4-star. That's the 4-star running back Jabari Wallace Coleman. Actually, it's Jabari Wallace Coleman. Excuse me on that one. And then this weekend coming in will be Georgia commit Bo Walker. So Carolina's down to 2 guys, 2 4-star guys, so highly rated guys, as you would expect with the success that Carolina's had in the backfield. But, at this point, how confident are you in Carolina's chances to actually land a running back in this class? Because we're back to, a pretty thin group that Carolina is dealing with here, including one guy that is currently committed.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, it's mainly down to those 2 guys. It seems like at most they are going to add one. You look at a guy first like Jabari Wallace Coleman that you mentioned. Seems like it's really down to Penn State and North Carolina, but it seems like there's an opportunity or sort of a buzz that, if Penn State pushes, he's theirs pretty quickly. And then you have another guy, a guy that's committed, looks to visit this weekend, and Georgia commit Bo Walker. And surprisingly enough, for being the committed recruit amongst these 2, he seems to be the more open in my mind. Georgia is looking at a number of running backs in this class. They are getting multiple guys committed there. So, this is one of those situations where numbers may favor decommitment. And then, North Carolina is in a prime spot to swoop in there as it relates to Walker. Don't really know that as of yet. That's going to be somewhat dependent on, different recruitments for the Bulldogs. But this is sort of the group that they have. And they really need to try to add someone here. I mean, you look at who they have sort of on scholarship going into this season. They got I believe a fifth-year senior or graduate in Darwin Barlow out of the portal. Amarian Hampton, you feel like you're going to get one more season with him, and he's probably off to the NFL. Maybe you get him to come back. And then Caleb Hood can take a redshirt year, but is listed on Carolina's roster as a senior. So that's, at least 2 to 3 potential guys out of 5 or 6 on scholarship that could potentially be gone. They're going to need to add guys, likely one here in this class, as well as potentially one in the portal as well. So it is imperative that they add hopefully someone in this class. If I were to pick between the two right now, I'd actually go with Bo Walker. I think that Georgia's they have some other guys. They're going to continue to recruit some other guys at the position, which could lead to Walker reopening his recruitment and then, potentially proceeding with a commitment to North Carolina from there. They've brought Wallace Coleman as well. We'll see where that goes. So I do think at this point, I am going to be optimistic that they are going to add one. But that's also on the fact that they desperately need at least one of these guys in this class, probably in addition to a JUCO or portal addition in the offseason, just based on, who's going out the door after the 2024 and then 2025 season have ended.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I mean, the fact that you're going to lose, and here's the thing. You could say, well, maybe they can convince Hampton to come, unless he gets injured, which, of course, knock on wood, we are hoping that does not happen. Or, I mean, he would just have to have a horrendous season. This dude is probably going to be the first running back taken off the board in next year's draft. If not one, he'll be two, and he will probably be a guy that will hear his name called on day 2 just because they don't really take running backs in the first round. That's the only reason why. With Bo Walker, it's weird because, yeah, I'm with you. I feel like Carolina has maybe a better chance with him than they do with Wallace Coleman. The concern is that if he reopens his recruitment, which I think he will, I think Georgia is, all in on some of these other guys. I think he was a guy that, probably jumped onto the scene early for them. They went out. He's a guy that, I mean, his stats, he has compiled a ton of stats at the high school level. And so he was a guy they jumped on early. They brought him in. And, now he's a guy that is probably questioning that commitment just a little bit with them looking elsewhere. But Georgia Tech is a legitimate threat in this situation because they're recruiting in-state very well. They're a team that's shown signs of life offensively, in this iteration of their offense under, their current head coach. And so I think there is an opportunity here for Carolina, but I mean, one, they got to get them on campus, which I think they will. And if they do, I think that shows you that Georgia Tech didn't necessarily blow him away. But I think you're right. I think what Carolina has to do is they have to show him. There is a level of desperation here that we need to add somebody in this class. Do I think it's completely off the table that Wallace Coleman could be that guy? No. But I will say that you're having to go into the state of Pennsylvania to land them. One, never easy to go into the state of Pennsylvania when they're not in your footprint, and never easy to go up against Penn State in their home state. They recruit a lot of those areas, D.C., as we talked about, Maryland, New Jersey. Those are areas they recruit very, very well. They pretty much own the home state. Pittsburgh, has had moments where they've landed significant guys from there, but that is Penn State's state. It's really tough to invade there. Ohio State, Michigan, those are the types of schools that typically go into there. But the one thing that Carolina could have in their favor that Penn State does not is the fact that Carolina, as of right now, he would be the guy. He would have a chance to come in and potentially compete for some reps next season, along with Davian Gauss, who's in there now. Maybe Caleb Hood, if he's able to, or if he chooses to probably apply for, I mean, he's got to be able to apply for another year with all the injuries that he's had. But it's also imperative that he stays healthy. And then, yeah, if they do bring in someone from the portal, which I would believe they would, but there's an opportunity for early playing time for Wallace Coleman. If he goes to Penn State, he's going to have to battle a guy that they've already landed in this class. And as far as I know, it does not seem like he is going anywhere in Alvin Henderson. So I think this, for Carolina, I think they've got a chance with both of these guys. But I'm with you. I think Bo Walker is probably the guy they have the better shot with. It's just at this point, it needs to be communicated that, look, one of you two guys is needed in this class. That's one of our biggest needs here. And if they can prove that to either one of these guys, who knows if they already did it for Wallace Coleman, then I think Carolina could walk away with a commitment at the position in this class. All right, guys, couple of closing notes for you here on the way out. The first one, Bryce Baker, speaking of the 2025 class, one of the guys that's committed in the class, their four-star quarterback, of course, out of the home state here, East Forsyth High School up there in Kernersville. He is out in Los Angeles right now, taking place in the Elite 11 finals. And this is a pretty prestigious group that's here in the Elite 11 finals. In terms of his opportunity to win this event, I think that would be probably a long shot. If I'm just being honest, it's nothing against him. I just think that you look at, some of the best quarterbacks in the country. I think the favorite going in is Julian Lewis, who is a guy that has taken multiple official visits as of right now. I don't remember if he is committed. I think he's committed to, or was at one time, was committed to USC. So he's a guy that, is going to go in pretty much as the presumed favorite. Yeah, he is currently committed to USC. There's also going to be guys like Antoine Hill, a guy out of the state of Georgia that Carolina did offer a while back. Ryan Montgomery. I mean, there are some of the best in the country that are going to be there. My thing for him, I think if he can go out there and really just put together, a strong performance, get some of the recognition. That's the thing. Draw some eyes away from some of those guys. I think he's got a chance. To me, I would say he has a chance to probably finish inside of the top 5 because I really do think he is that talented. But in terms of his opportunity to win this one, I just don't know how realistic that is. Still, that would be an amazing feat for Carolina. He is, of course, the first Carolina quarterback commit to be there since a guy that is now back on the roster in Jacoby Criswell. So regardless, it's a great opportunity for him, and I think he has a chance to fare a little bit better than Jacoby did when he was out there in Los Angeles a few years back. The last note that we'll leave you on, 2026 class, not a ton going on for Carolina. They did end up, of course, contacting a bunch of guys. Contact was allowed with that class officially on June 15th. Carolina talking to a bunch of members of that class. They've handed out some offers as well. And now they've landed on a top 10 list. 4-star tight end Corbin Fordham. Carolina landed on his list the other day. In terms of Carolina's, actual chances in this race, a lot of heavy hitters here for a guy that is out of Jacksonville, Florida, as you would expect. But again, the fact that Carolina is even on that top 10 list, I think shows you that they are doing some good things early in that recruitment. And he is one of just 2 offers at the tight end position in that class. Carolina is going to need some tight end help here in future years. Now, they did bring in a couple of guys in this past year's class. They've also got 2 guys currently committed at the tight end position in this year's class. So I think, they're still going to continue to try to add guys there. He could be one that Carolina is taking a shot with, and we'll have to keep monitoring where they stand with him. But for now, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Guys, head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Articles up there about really all of the guys that we just talked about here. There was an article about Shamarius Peterkin when he, announced that he was going to be on campus. There's an article up there about Kanoa Winston and what that means for Carolina at the safety position. And then there is an article up there about Jasper Parker, and we talk a little bit more in that article about Carolina's chances with Jabri Wallace-Coleman as well as Bo Walker. So all of that stuff up there on the website for you guys to check out. Also going to get an article up about Julian Horton taking an official visit to Carolina over the weekend, as well as Carolina does search for that possible safety addition in the class. So all of that on the website. Of course, all the off-season basketball coverage for you guys as well. And you can only find it in one place, HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure you go there each and every day to check on the latest news. But for now, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. I want to thank Zach for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.